History has its bizarre moments. In the previous two parts to this series, we've explored a total of 50 apparent historical details that highlight all angles of humanity's absurdity. In today's video, we're going to be bringing that number up to 75, with 25 more absurd random history facts. Please bear in mind that history as we know it to be written is always tarred by interpretation after interpretation. Absurdity almost always spawns from the absence of context, and whilst we try our hardest to ensure the information we share is correct, that's not always the way it shakes out, but fingers crossed. We're not exactly professional historians, we just enjoy it casually. It's also worth remembering some events, details and facts may seem perfectly sane in more context than provided in this video. Sometimes they may seem even madder. So we've gathered some jaw-dropping, unusual, sometimes hilarious, other times shocking facts that highlight humanity's endless battle with ridiculousness. Please enjoy 25 absurd random history facts, part 3. The New England Courant was one of the first American newspapers founded in Boston in the year 1721 by James Franklin. A year later, in 1722, a series of over a dozen letters penned by a supposedly widowed Mrs. Silence Dogood would be published fortnightly by the outlet, poking fun at life in colonial America. These letters were something of a sensation, and some men would write in offering to wed Silence Dogood. However, Silence Dogood was not her real name. In fact, she wasn't even a she. She was the 16-year-old he named Benjamin Franklin, the younger brother to the New England Courant's founder, James. As it turns out, he was denied several times when attempting to publish letters under his own name to the Courant. As a result, he came up with an alias. He's famous for plenty of other things now, however, he's constantly remained a rather interesting character. I'm sure future installments to this series will see his name crop up again and again. Number 2. Carlsberg Special Brew was first brewed in 1950 to commemorate Sir Winston Churchill's visit to Copenhagen. The beverage has a hint of cognac flavour to reflect Churchill's dinner chaser of choice. What's odd is that this particular variation of a Danish swig exists because of Britain's sizable cigar man. Antoine Augustin Parmentier was a French pharmacist and nutritionist who lived during the 18th century. As a prisoner of war under the Prussians during the 7 Years' War, he was forced to eat potatoes. The French refused to accept the potatoes that were introduced to the European continent centuries prior, believing them to cause diseases such as leprosy. France had even officially banned the vegetable in 1748. Upon Parmentier's return to his French homeland leprosy-free, at least as far as we can tell, he dedicated his life to the study of potatoes, writing about their nutritional value and health benefits. He would develop recipes, write books and promote potato dishes, convincing the ban to be lifted. As a result of his actions, potatoes increased in popularity amongst the French populace. As bonus information for non-French speakers, potato in French is pomme de terre, which translates to English as apple of the earth. I remember that one from secondary school. This fact is quite common, but quite absurd all the same. It's quicker to list the nations Britain hasn't invaded than it is to list the nations Britain has. This is because, of all 193 United Nations member states, Britain, one way or another, has invaded 171 of them. During the Cold War, the United States FBI detected the potential activities of a spy feeding intelligence to the Soviet Union's KGB within their ranks, and tasked Special Agent Robert Hanssen with uncovering their identity. The problem was, Robert Hanssen was the KGB informer, so he was searching for himself. As another fairly common fact, ancient Greek Olympic athletes performed naked, and well-oiled, but that's a different story. This was a tribute to the Greek gods and was also considered a sign of civilization. Up until the late 20th century, left-handedness had been stigmatized as sinful and a sign of the devil. I'm not sure to which extent Christianity focused on it, but I remember that my great-grandfather believed this. He was blessed with longevity, so yes, I did get to meet him. I guess it's a fun devil fact too. He's apparently left-handed. Left-hand dominant people would be forced to utilize their right in favor of their left, but particularly in the Western world and many other places, that is no longer the case. On the Isle of Portland in Dorset, England, the word rabbit is controversial. This is believed to derive from quarry workers who would see rabbits popping their heads up before dangerous rock falls around a century ago. There's no record of this superstition prior to the early 20th century though. If you go to the Isle of Portland today, be mindful of the word rabbit and maybe consider avoiding introducing the locals to Monty Python. Ancient Egyptian Pharaoh Pepi II was said to have stripped servants nude and slackered them in honey to attract insects to them rather than himself when conducting business outdoors. The Roundhay Garden scene is a silent motion picture that is believed to be the oldest surviving piece of film in the world. It was filmed in Leeds, England, because of course it was, by Louis Le Prince, and released on the 14th of October 1888. That would make it almost 135 years old today. It lasts for an astonishing 2 and a bit seconds. Sensational. The French inventor behind it would then go on to disappear in France 2 years later. According to the 1st century Latin writer known as Valerius Maximus, in roughly 455 BCE, ancient Greek tragedy playwright, I'm gonna botch this, Aeschylus, died when an eagle dropped a tortoise on his head, mistaking him for a rock suitable for shattering the shell. It's unclear if this is actually the truth or if it was a misunderstanding interpreted from scripture at his tomb. William Henry Harrison was the 9th President of the United States. He was also the shortest serving US President, dying only 1 month into his term on the 4th of April, 1841. He'd caught a cold that had developed into pneumonia, which is kinda sad. On the 15th of January 1919, in the North End neighbourhood of Boston, Massachusetts, a storage tank holding 2.3 million US gallons of molasses, a sugar substitute that I'm mostly unfamiliar with, weighing approximately 12,000 metric tons, burst, causing a massive flood that spread at 35 miles per hour and killed 21 people, injuring hundreds more. What a sticky way to go. The tragedy became known as the Great Molasses Flood. During the Cold War in the 1950s, a CIA operative hatched a plan to drop extra-large condoms on the Eastern Bloc nations marked medium or small, in an attempt to reduce their morale by implying that Americans had massive cocks. Naturally, the plan never developed, but that would have been up there as one of the funniest moments of the Cold War had it happened. It makes you wonder what other crazy ideas the CIA has had over the years that we've simply never heard about, because at the very least there's a good few that we have. The first bomb dropped on Berlin during the Second World War claimed no human lives, but instead landed in the city's zoo and killed its only elephant. Or at least that's how the story has been presented over the years. The truth is, the zoo in Berlin had way more than only one elephant, and it's unclear if it was the first bomb that fell on the city, but the bombs that did fall on the city killed at least one. But one did apparently survive, and that's probably where the confusion came from. In 1809, the Portuguese royal family relocated to Rio de Janeiro in modern-day Brazil. Therefore, for a period of just over a decade until 1821, when the royal family returned to Lisbon, Rio de Janeiro was deemed the official capital city of Portugal, despite being situated on a different continent nearly 8,000 kilometers away. Brazil would become independent from Portuguese rule in 1822. Wojtek was the name of a Syrian brown bear that was enlisted officially as a soldier with the rank of private within the Polish Second Corps. I don't know military speak, so forgive me. Before being promoted to corporal, he served with the 22nd Artillery Supply Company in Italy during the latter stages of the Second World War and became something of a celebrity. He apparently enjoyed smoking cigarettes. My only question is, how does a soldier bear sound infinitely less terrifying than an ordinary bear? At his death in 1087, William the Conqueror was reportedly quite a large guy. The manner of his death caused his intestines to rupture, and considering he was king, it took a while for his funeral to be organised, meaning come his funeral he had been dead for some time. When the time finally came to lay him in his coffin, he was apparently too large and his body effectively exploded. Though the records are likely slightly exaggerated, it is quite possible that his ruptured organs burst and caused the funeral to smell rather foul. Violet Jessup was an Argentine maritime stewardess and nurse who survived the sinking of the Titanic in 1912 and the Britannic in 1916. She was also present aboard the RMS Olympic when it collided with British warship HMS Hawke in 1911. Fox tossing was a popular sport amongst the bored, depraved, wealthy elite in the 17th and 18th century Europe. The premise of this blood sport was quite simple: catapulting a poor live fox as far and high as possible. As you can imagine, this often proved fatal for the foxes. However, on occasion they would turn on the participants and cause damage on the way out. As it turns out, that's only the second most disturbing definition of fox tossing I can think of. Speaking of animal cruelty, during the Spanish Civil War, a besieged nationalist garrison was airdropped medical supplies. However, they didn't use parachutes. Instead, they used turkeys. The weight was too much for a turkey to effectively prevent falling. However, the turkey's flapping would control the descent enough that the supplies made it to the ground in one piece. The turkeys, however, would die upon landing and were then presumably cooked and eaten by the garrison. The word fenestration means to build a window. Well, kind of in a roundabout sense, but you get the point. However, defenestration means to throw somebody out of a window. It also means to dismiss somebody of political power. This wide double meaning is due to an event where both definitions were exacted in the same action. The defenestration of Prague took place in the year 1618 when disgruntled Protestant estates threw 2 Catholic governors and 1 secretary out of the window from the top floor of Prague Castle. Nobody died, however, as the defenestrates, which is not a word but should be a word, are believed to have landed in a huge pile of manure. Of course, contemporaries would refer to this as divine intervention. The end result was the 30 Years' War. It certainly wasn't the first defenestration of Prague. The other one occurred almost 200 years prior, but it is believed to be where the definition of defenestration originated. Today, I regard it as one of my favourite words of all time. The ancient Romans used sacred chickens raised by priests known as the Polarius to consult regarding significant decisions. The chickens would be thrown seed. If they ate the seed, the chickens decided in favour of the decision. If they did not, they decided against it. Victor Lustig was an Austro-Hungarian con artist who, upon reading a news article in 1925 regarding problems with the Eiffel Tower's maintenance, hatched a scheme. He successfully sold the Eiffel Tower in a scheme that worked so swimmingly he attempted to do it again. This time the police caught wind and he had to flee to the US. He would become known as the man who sold the Eiffel Tower twice, but it appears he only managed to close the bogus deal the once. During the British colonial occupation of India, the story goes, officials were so concerned regarding the number of venomous cobras in Delhi that it offered a bounty reward for every dead cobra. However, it was significantly cheaper to breed cobras than the British were willing to pay per snake, so people would breed them just to turn them in. When the bounties were dropped, people no longer had any need for their stockpiles of snakes and simply set them free. So the Cobra effect was born, where incentives intended for resolving a problem wind up rewarding people for making it worse. The story is of course a little more than an unreliable anecdote that cannot be proven true, but the Cobra effect has been demonstrated a fair few times, such as the Hanoi rat massacre in 1902, where French colonial authorities offered bounties for rats killed by the populace. However, all they needed to do was prove that they'd killed a rat, and this was done by presenting a tail. So people would slice the tails off of rats and then let them go so they could reproduce and create more rats so they could slice their tails off too. The French did twig on when they started noticing rats roaming around without tails. So that brings us rather nicely to the end of today's video. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully this has been at least an entertaining watch. We hope that you've enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, maybe share the channel with your friends. We would massively appreciate it. And with any luck, we'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. Until next time, take care, goodbye.